Okay, hello. Welcome to the next installment of the Green Mountain Book Festival. Thank you very much for coming. I want to thank Phoenix Books first. They are a founding sponsor of the Green Mountain Book Festival, and they have generously donated this space for this event today. If you are so inclined, please go down and buy lots of books and help support them as well. This panel is all about humor in science fiction, and we've got a bunch of really great authors who are going to tell you all about it in just a minute. Let me introduce them. So first up, we have M.T. Anderson. He's a New York Times best-selling author who writes books for children, teen. Can you all? Is this on? Can you hear me? It doesn't sound like it's not on, or maybe it's too far away. Let me start over. M.T. Anderson is New York Times best-selling author who writes books for children, teens, and adults, including The Pox Party, which won the National Book Award, and the science fiction satire Feed, which is a finalist for the National Book Award and which won the LA Times Book Prize. His fantasy novel for kids about a boy and a magical dog in the hills of Vermont, Elf, Dog, and Owlhead, won a Newbery Award. And his most recent book, Nicked, is a finalist for the Vermont Book Award. It's a historical heist set in the 11th century. He lives in Calais. Next up, we have Emily Hamilton, who is a science fiction author who writes about women kissing in space. Her debut novel, The Stars Too Fondly, was a 2024 Audiophiles Earphones Award winner and a finalist for the 2025 Compton Crook Award. Her sophomore novel, Ascendancy, the first in a new genre-bending cyberpunk trilogy, is forthcoming. And she is formerly an award-winning staff writer at the alt-weekly newspaper 7 Days, and she lives in Burlington with her wife and tiny dog. Next up, we have John Scalzi, who is an award-winning science fiction author, screenwriter, commentator from Ohio. In 1998, he launched his personal blog, Whatever, on which he published his first novel, Agents of the Stars, in 1999. In 2002, he released Old Man's War, which attracted the attention of an editor who acquired it for traditional publication. It was published in 2005 and earned considerable acclaim, including a Hugo Award nomination for Best Novel. He has since continued the story with 6 sequels, and most recently, The Shattering Peace. Next up, Craig Alanson. When Craig Alanson has a real job, he wrote code to generate financial reports nobody read. Now he writes best-selling science fiction fantasy books, mostly as an excuse to not have time to clean out the garage. He says that his wife is not happy about that. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. His first novel, Columbus Day, was a finalist for Audiobook of the Year, and Craig and his long-suffering wife live in Vermont during the summers and Florida in the winters, and he has not yet been a finalist for Florida Man of the Year, thankfully. And last but not least, Mike Luoma celebrates 20 years as an independent author, publisher, and podcaster. In 2025, he was offering his original science fiction and nonfiction books, graphic novels, short stories, and comic books in all sorts of forms. And from Tales of the Future, like the Vatican Assassin Trilogy and Adventures of Alibi Jones, to explorations of the past, like the Ancient Stone Mysteries of New England. Luoma chronicles fictional adventures and historical hypotheses. He's been bringing fiction to audio life for almost 20 years, narrating his own work, and recently passed his 800th episode of his free serialized audio science fiction podcast, Glow in the Dark Radio. Give him a warm welcome. So how we've been doing this is I'll start everybody off with a prompt, and then we'll have you guys pass the microphone around one by one. We'll about 30 or 40 minutes, we'll open up to questions. We'll hand off a microphone, and then they will answer, and we'll go from there. So I guess just to sort of start off with, science fiction fantasy is often, you think of like spaceships and zany adventures and things like that in space. You don't always think about humor in science fiction, with a couple of exceptions like Douglas Adams. So I'm curious if you guys can talk a little bit at first about like what role do you see humor as playing in your fiction, and whoever wants to catch first can go first.
I'll start. I see it as part of characterization, because I think the humor comes out of the characters, at least in what I'm writing. I have a kind of a first-person point of view because I've got an italicized thought process going on, which lets you in on what the lead character's thinking, and that's where I'm getting most of my humor from, is him reacting to the situation. So for me, I find it to be a part of the characterization.
Yeah, I write mostly military science fiction, which tends to be a sausage fest of, the doomed mercenary band. Like, how would they recruit for that organization? But humor brings in a different audience and opens up your books. I mean, military sci-fi generally is male audience. I have a huge female audience, and I think you do too, probably, yeah. And this guy, by the way, gave me the permission to write humor in sci-fi, military sci-fi, because I actually read Agents of the Stars first. Then I read Old Man's War, and I'm like, that is cool. You can do that. You can sell a book like that. Now, I couldn't, which is why I'm self-published, but...
You've done fine. But he actually makes a good point. I remember actually Old Men's War sold, and Tor was like, do you have another book? And I was like, well, there is Agent of the Stars. And they're like, no, that's funny. And for a very, very long time, it was quite difficult to sell a book where you explicitly acknowledged that it was humorous. And some of that actually goes down to Douglas Adams. He had an extinction level event for humor in science fiction, very much like Star Wars was an extinction level event for the type of cinematic science fiction which came before. After Douglas Adams, everybody was like, well, this is what humor is supposed to be. Write that humor in science fiction, go write that. And Adams was a trained British pharmacist. He's the only person besides Neil Innes who has a credit in Monty Python as a writer, aside from the Monty Python writers, Monty Python members themselves. So everybody was doomed to try to do that, and then because of that, for a very long time, they're like, humor doesn't sell, humor doesn't sell. So you could put humor in things, but you couldn't acknowledge that it was there. Do not look behind the clown-shaped curtain. And it wasn't actually until Red Shirts that they finally acknowledged that, yes, this is an actual funny book. And part of the reason that they were okay with that, aside from the previous track record, was I attached Red Shirts to a very old contract that didn't have a lot of money on it. So if it failed, they didn't care. Fortunately, it didn't fail. And since then, and it won the Hugo. Yeah, I mean, it did okay. But since then, humor has been, they were like, oh no, you can actually do that.
I think I am the one on this panel holding it down for romantic comedy in science fiction, which I personally think it's a match made in heaven, even though I'm working on making it happen the way romantasy has happened. But I think I have had. There is a perception, I think, among people who don't read science fiction that it's a very dour, serious, math-heavy genre, and it's not, and I don't. It never has been. For me, the romantic comedy of it flows so naturally. For all its faults, I love the pulp era, like. From the beginning, science fiction has been about, banging hot aliens and all of the.
That was just Tim Kirk.
It wasn't though. It was. Yeah, and there's so much humor that can arise from situations such as these, and I love. Getting silly with it, even in non-romantic situations in my writing. I think having a sense of humor really helps the reader, as you were saying, connect to the characters in a way that often allows you to get more serious in a more emotionally impactful way. Also. Once the reader has been like joking around with these characters for 300 pages, Yeah,
I would say, for me, I mean, you were talking about how it's based in character for you, or in Emily's book, where it's kind of like, you have this sort of sarcastic, wisecracking computer captain or whatever. I would say the difference, so I write sort of, most of my science fiction ends up being sort of satirical. And therefore, the humor is kind of like laced through the world itself. And in a sense, it's because we're living in a freaking farce right now. Like a farce that kills people. Like, that's the hideous reality of it. And so I feel like that kind of like absurdism, there's a place for it right now. You know, it's an important thing right now to say our lives are being run by like a clown car full of, you know, people who are forcing all of these things on the rest of us. So that is, I think, the absurd comes out naturally right now, you know. And I think actually back, you know, to the early science fiction writing, a lot of it is like I think about like William Tenn or, you know, like is it R.J. Lafferty? I don't remember the. R.A. Lafferty, right. You know, like really, really wonderful humor. It's like there's a very fun William Tenn story about a planet where where a species has 8 different sexes that all have to interact, and Hollywood sends someone there to make a rom-com. And so, like, it's very funny because, of course, what it does is it kind of punctures this idea of Hollywood trying to streamline a romance, because now, oh my God, what do I do when I have to bring together these 8 separate creatures for this? And like, and it's, yeah, so like, it's a great way of like commenting on a part of reality through distortion and the grotesque and the funny and that kind of thing.
So each person has to swipe right on Tinder 7 times.
Oh my God. No, I know. Like, I'm sure that life is dying out on that planet for that reason. Absolutely, yeah.
We're vamping now.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So So question for you. Romantic comedy relies a lot on misunderstandings, different personalities, etc. Is that what your humor is based on?
I think a lot of it can be, yes, and I think when you're writing science fiction and you're dealing with imagined technologies and imagined other species and stuff, I think it's super rife for romantic comedy potential. I mean, in my book, The Stars Do Fondly, one of the main characters is a hologram, and one of them is a human, and like, how's that gonna work is a huge part of it. And I just think the situational comedy can write itself when you're dealing with robots and holograms and aliens.
Yeah, it's
and
based
all
on
these
the
things.
character's reaction to a situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, John, question for you.
Yes, moderator.
Your humor relies a lot on sarcasm and on characters saying, here's what I really want to say to you, but here's what I'm going to say to you. Sure. Yeah, they're just done with this shit.
It's really interesting to me. I mean, I do occasionally get criticism that, and I swear this is an actual criticism that I've said. Someone's like, I don't like Scalzi's books. All of his characters are so smart and witty. And I'm like, what do you want from me? Do you really want me to do an entire book of people just being dim and dour? Because I will do that shit. I will 100% make that thing happen for you, and then you'll hate it. Like, what happened to Scalzi? This is not what we come to Scalzi for. But this is the thing. I mean, I grew up with a bunch of incredibly witty and sarcastic people. Our favorite game was Hearts, not because we were interested in the game, but because it allowed for endless rounds of personal destruction against the other person. Because every time you're like, making, someone trying to shoot the moon, or you're like, oh no, here, have another heart. Are you hungry yet? Oh, are you full? Oh no, you're not. Here we are. And just the first time the woman who became my wife came and watched me and my friends play Hearts as we left, she's like, do you actually like your friends? That sort of thing. But that banter, that back and forth, that's
all
that
your
sort of
friends
thing.
were guys, right?
Yeah, all my friends were
Yeah,
guys.
so.
But the other thing about it is, and then speaking of romantic comedy, I was a movie critic for many years, and so my storycraft came out of film. Nora Ephron is one of my all-time favorite writers, and just the way that her characters bantered back and forth. And I think it's really important for me to acknowledge that even though I have people who are my idols in science fiction and fantasy, so many of my writing idols came from outside of that. Beyond Nora Ephron, Elaine May, William Goldman, Ben Hecht, if you want to go further back. And that quality of dialogue, that people being sharp as tacks at each other was something that I was like, that sounds great. You can do so much with that, not only establishing character, but sending plot forward. And that's, I think, and that's important. But now let me turn it on you.
Uh-oh.
You who have asked two people questions, now it's back to you. You were talking about the fact that science fiction, military science fiction in particular, is generally thought to be masculine and dour and all of that sort of stuff, and yet you did find a way to bring humor in it. You said that perhaps I was the one who showed that could be done, but your humor is your humor, so talk about the process of doing that.
Okay, so first, I tried to write a John Scalzi book. No, don't do that. It crashed and burned. It will never see the light of day, yeah. And then I found my voice by writing 2 more horrible books, but going on from then. Yeah, I had the idea to write the book after the movie Battle Los Angeles, which was one of these, small band of guys with guns defeat alien invasion. Dude, they came from another star. They can nuke us from orbit. No. There must be some other way humanity can survive. And I mean, I have, my fans can say, I have killed off major characters, fan favorite characters. You can only hang on to an audience doing that if you've got something else that they want to hang on to. And I think that's why a lot of women like my books. I mean, not just for the humor, but because I write guys' thoughts the way guys really think. And women are like, I like to see that. Yeah, get that, peek behind the curtain there. So, question for you. Yeah. There's the.
Stars every day that we cannot broadcast thought.
Yes. Yeah. There's the meme of the man and woman, sleeping, and she's like, he's thinking about other women, and he's like, I wonder if I could repaint my motorcycle. So, question for you. Okay. This is the question that writers hate. I'm going to ask: where do you get your humorous ideas from?
From my characters. I'll circle right back. Once you start writing a character and they come alive inside, they have their own voice. And if you've established a humorous voice, he's going to be as sarcastic and as unique in their own outlook as you are as a person. And so I just let my character talk to me after a while and put what they're telling me on the page, or moderating it some, because they might be going a little too far for me. But I've found that for me it was like just a natural occurrence as part of the writing to let that part of the character out. I mean, totally not funny, but Dune was a huge impact on me, a huge influence way back when. And
Dune was hilarious.
And the italicized thoughts, I thought, that's what I want to do, because I want to have that kind of insight into my character. And once I started writing that way, and my character was already an assassin for the Vatican in the future, where, you're not supposed to write about religion, you're not supposed to write about politics, you're not supposed to have humor in sci-fi, so I did all that. And
Worked out pretty well.
it worked out okay. And then I had to worry when Charlie Sheen decided he was going to talk about being a Vatican assassin, tiger blood stuff. But luckily, a few other people were like, dude, you have nothing to worry about. You had it out beforehand. He can't trademark it on you. Go ahead, don't worry. But
do your ideas just pop into your head for humor, or?
I find that it just grows out of telling the story. Like in the situation the character's in, for me, it's more of a reaction thing. It's like, okay, so how is this character going to have this impact them? What's it gonna feel like to them, and how are they gonna react? Is he gonna say something that's gonna be authentic, or is he gonna say something that is just like him talking to himself and lying to himself? So he's still an unreliable narrator, but you're getting a unique insight into, I guess, his internal self. And like you were saying, then that lets you do things later that might have more impact emotionally because you've given that kind of a connection to that character. I know in my second series, Alibi Jones, he's an entirely different character. Vatican Assassin was his father, same universe, but it's a generation later. And his thought processes are entirely different. They're still funny, but it's because he's not quite as smart as his father was. So it's like each character brings a little bit something different to that, but it's in their reactions that I'm finding the humor.
And I mean, I think the thing about humor is that it's a way we connect to each other, and it's also a way we lie to each other. And I think it can be such a powerful character building tool, because I think so often really funny people are also really repressed and like hiding their feelings, and that makes for compelling character writing. It's not only like what are they joking about, it's what are they trying not to be serious about. Exactly. And so I always approach writing a very funny character as I almost feel like there's a built-in character conflict, because why do they want to be so funny? Why are they trying not to be serious? What are they what's the reason they want to like keep everybody laughing and not talking about other things, you know?
But Dr. I. M. Pagliacci,
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because I was thinking about this when your bio is being read, that you write for children and you write for adults. And modulating humor for those different audiences is something that is very interesting to me, because you have to, the things that will work for adults aren't necessarily the same things that will work for kids, and vice versa. So how do you, as a writer, modulate between those audiences? And what things can you do for both, and what things are specific to those audiences?
Well, when I write for teens, I don't really modulate it. And in fact, that was kind of a stand I took early in my career, that I felt like and probably, in fact, most of the people in this room, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, I was reading books for adults. Sure. You know what I mean? And like, it felt good to read those. And so my idea as a YA author... No, I did not. Although the school actually had a copy of the Decameron where all the sex was still in Latin. Clever, huh? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, you can read about a monk having sex. Just you have to learn a few things first. But I feel like, what my feeling was, like, teens all the time are reading books for adults. So my aim was to write books for teens that were as complex as books for adults, but they were for teens. So I really, because I just felt like, and this is true even more now, but there was such a kind of like a lack of trust in the intelligence of teens. There was by the time I was an adult, there was already that kind of like funnel where there was this sense of like, teens have to be given this sort of like corporate lowest common denominator of interests and that kind of thing, because they're a market. You know what I mean, that we're trying to sell to, and we don't want to frighten them away by having anything that's too particular, which comes back to the point that both of you are making about how humor also particularizes personalities and that kind of thing. So writing for younger kids, I do modulate. And the subject matter, the depth of the irony, that kind of thing, it's not as biting. But I feel like for teens, I really made an effort to be like, no, I'm gonna just try to fly straight and tell it like it is.
So the best examples of romantic comedy do tend to be movies, right? So my question is both, did you, because I talked about drawing from the humor of film into my stuff. Did you do that as well? Or did you have literary models that you were thinking about as well when you were developing your comedy for your literature?
Totally. I mean, I think the reason that the genre tends to thrive the most, at least historically, in film is because it's so dialogue heavy. And when I was in college, every writing class I took was actually screenwriting or playwriting, because I love dialogue. It's like where I feel like I thrive as a writer. I'm one of 5 kids. I'm just like, I'm always thinking in like huge bouncing conversations, you know? So I take a lot of inspiration from plays and from movies. But I also think that around the time I started writing The Stars Too Fondly in like 2018, 2019, there was beginning to be a sort of renaissance in queer romantic comedy novels that were coming out. Like Casey McQuiston is one who they were so inspirational to me, that kind of wrote with the same heart, the same banter as like your favorite romantic comedy films, but really managed successfully to translate it into novel form. And I love that. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I keep asking questions, but this is the question for the entire crowd. I talk a lot about what I call the failure of comedy is a cliff, whereas the failure of drama tends to be, it fails much more gracefully. If I make you sad at 100%, you cry. If I make you sad at 80%, you have a lump in your throat. At 60%, you're still sad. 40%, you're like, well, I can see where he was going. And then below that, you failed. Right. Whereas humor is, it works, or why do people think you are funny? So for the question, I guess a general question is, one, is this something that you relate to? And second of all, how do you deal with the fact that humor has such a cliff when it comes to success and failure?
Wow, good question. You're right. A joke either lands or it doesn't.
Right.
And I think to be a humor writer, you have to be the kind of person who can tell a story at a party. If you can't do that, you're going to just lose your audience. And I include a lot of humor in my books, and my fans love it, but my fans love it. A lot of people would not. So it's a self-selective audience. And, I mean, I don't... So who here was in the first panel? The 1 o'clock panel? There was a question there about, you know, why should I believe in fantasy that a dragon can breathe fire? Does it breathe, you know, flammable gas? Is it something to do with its digestive system? And my stupid brain instantly thought, Taco Bell. The dragon's like, let me eat this bag of gordillas. Give me 10 minutes. And it's just like, things pop into your head, and I need to find a way to put them into a book. But I don't sit there and think of something funny. I think of something funny in my regular life and then fit it into the book. Yeah.
I didn't tell anybody I was writing comedy or that it was supposed to be funny. So I just kind of went for it and hoped that people would find things funny that I found funny. And luckily they did. So I don't know. For me, I kind of like stealthily sort of put the humor in and didn't really bill it as such. But then after the fact, people are like, man, BC, he makes me laugh. He's such an asshole sometimes.
Well, I mean, so you had mentioned earlier the idea of comedy as a protective reflex, and my therapist would agree with you. But I mean, I also think that there is something about that it expresses something fundamental and not always very happy about the human experience. Like, you know, I think about like you know, a lot of early Soviet science fiction writers, or even later Soviet science fiction writers. You know, they're writing in this kind of like absurdist science fiction vein. Number one, because they can't say what they really need to say, and so there has to be sort of allegorical. And then number two, because in fact they live in a world that has become so brutally absurd that the only way for them to talk about it is through, you know, like stuff like in Stanislaw, like, you know, in the Siberiad or something, or, you know, I mean, yeah, so anyway, so I feel like it comes out naturally because there's a world view that is like, there is a sort of a cosmic comedy, and that's not necessarily a happy thing. So I do think that comedy is often relegated to this thing of like, no, you're protecting yourself from realities. It can also, in a very different way, be a way to deal with, in fact, the crisis of what it is like to be alive.
Yeah, all such good points. I don't have a ton to add, except maybe to branch into the topic of sometimes it's really hard to write comedy when you're writing genre fiction, when you're writing in an alternate world, and you don't have all the references of our own world in your story. I think Stars Too Fondly, it takes place in a near future Earth, and so I did feel like I could keep some Star Trek jokes in there. But other than that, you have to be really, it's an art to make it situational comedy in the completely fictional outer space situation you're writing in, because you don't want to take the reader out of it, for sure.
I think this is an incredibly important point that both of you have made, which is that humor is so context dependent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are some things that are always going to be naturally funny, like pratfall or physical humor and stuff like that. That I think that is universal. But particularly when you're dealing with irony, or you're dealing with farce, or anything else like that, or absurdity, which is so hard to do. It is absolutely dependent on your understanding of the context, your ability to communicate that context, but also, most importantly, the ability of your audience to follow it. And I think an analogy that I would make for that is like slang, right? In that if you don't know the slang and your kid goes skibbity Ohio on you, and you have no idea what that means, it just doesn't work. And if someone comes in, it's like, I'm going to translate that for you. Skibbity Ohio means such and such and such. You're like, oh, I get it. It's still not funny because you've had to go through that intermediary step. There was a South Park episode where the kids start talking about 6-7, right? And literally in Hollywood Reporter, there was like, what does 6-7 mean? It was basically for everybody above the age of 18. And if you are the kid, it's fucking hilarious. Yes. And everybody else is like, I don't know, and I'm upset. And kids these days, back in my day.
Well, and so actually one of my novels, Feed, created a kind of a slang, a future teenage slang to get around that problem. And I think also, just as a point of craft for those of you who are writing, one of the things is you do have to watch for real world references that somehow seem anachronistic in the future. But the fun part is you can just make crap up that's funny in the future, right? So that's the freedom. Like I'm rereading Feed for the first time in 20 years or something because I have to do the graphic novel script for it. And it's so interesting to see, like, occasionally, like, oh, God, there's a reference that did not age well. But the ones that work best are the ones where I just say something. I clearly just thought of it while I was typing and put it in, like adults are going to something called choking parties. I don't know what they are, but it seemed like something that you do when you're having, like, a midlife crisis. So I just wrote it. And so that's the good thing. Or they talk about going to they have, you go to this great bar, everyone has extra arms there. I don't know what it really means, but that's the kind of thing. Like, you can throw that in. There's the freedom for humor.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you got it. Ask the question.
Okay, well, how about some of people's favorite books that actually do meld sci-fi and humor? What are some of the things that you have loved?
Anything by John Scalzi.
Oh.
No, seriously. I mean, everything you write. Well, the book you dropped to write Kaiju instead, that was not funny, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So I haven't read that one because it might never see the light of day. Yeah.
Oh no! In 2020, I was writing this dark, gritty political thriller set in space, and it turns out 2020 was a bad year to be trying to write that thing. I mean, there was going to be some humor in it, regardless, because I'm me, but it was not humor forward. The only thing that I've ever written that has no humor in it whatsoever was a novella that was called "The God Engines," in which. Yes, yes, that's right. And the whole point of that was to make the point that I could write things that weren't humorous. And so it was basically, what if spaceships were powered by angry enslaved gods? And what happens when one of them gets out? And the answer is no good thing. Afterwards, people were like, I read your God Engines. Do you need a hug? So I remember reading, speaking of humor and things that got me. Of course, in science fiction, I remember reading Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when I was 11 years old in the back of my friend Michael Burns' mother's car as we were driving to the beach, and I was 100% sure I was going to pee myself in the car because I was laughing so hard. It was unbelievable. My humor comes, again, from elsewhere. I got a lot of humor out of people like, because I was a newspaper columnist for a while. That's what I wanted to do with my life. I'm an accidental novelist. But people like Molly Ivins, Dave Barry, Mike Royko, H.L. Mencken, to go further back. Humor from Dorothy Parker, Robert Benchley, Thurber. All of that sort of stuff, all that sort of humor from mystery. Gregory MacDonald, speaking of people who understood dialogue, like his dialogue was such an important part of his books that they were the cover art, right? And that's unbelievable, but that sort of humor there. And William Goldman doing the thing in Marathon Man, where Marathon Man, they have the horrible tooth interrogation, and he goes to like a dentist and he wants clove oil. And he keeps asking for clove oil. And the dentist will, well, how about this? Or I would do that. It's just the tension of just give me the thing and not being able to do it. It was just unbelievably funny. So there's just so many places in that. But going back to science fiction, also the humor that I saw situationally in Heinlein, like in Stranger in a Strange Land, when they disappear all the cops, and Jubal Harshaw is like this indiscriminate liquidation of policemen must stop. Just the flat effect that they've said that was the point where I was understood that humor is situational. You can say things and not be like, yada, 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 this is completely farcical, ha, 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 ha. You can have people say things that aren't funny to them, but are funny to you. So, who wants it?
Anybody remember Bill the Galactic Hero? Oh, yeah. I don't know. That was an early influence on me. That was Harry Harrison, I think. Yeah, and it was totally played up for stupid laughs, but it was an attempt at humorous sci-fi. I mean, but mostly I like the situational stuff and things that are incidental. I mean, growing up with Herbert and Heinlein and Asimov. I mean, not so much Asimov because he didn't really have characters so much, but. The rest of them, a lot of it was situational, and I liked the wry humor of it.
So question for the former... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, one more.
Right. I mean, I think, first of all, talking of Star Trek humor in my books, Red Shirts was one of my favorite books in high school. Love.
Thank you. I feel old.
And I also think, frankly, The Martian is hilarious, and it's something that I think I feel like I talk a lot about how I think currently in science fiction we're kind of living in a post The Martian world in the sense of everyone. I feel like a lot of writers and readers. The legacy of The Martian is like the really rigorous like scientific accuracy of it, and that's what people remember about it. But we talk a lot less about how funny The Martian is and what an amazing character study it is of the main character. And I again with the situational comedy, I think so much of science fiction is so ripe for situations that you have to have a sense of humor about. So, yeah.
So you talked about writing screenplays, and we have a former film critic here. I have a question for you. Humor on the screen, especially romantic humor, translates better on the screen because you can see the character's facial reaction. It's really hard to write that. So I'm thinking there's two kinds of humor in dialogue. There's the, like you write a lot, the person against the voice of authority, God, I got to deal with this shit, and they're being sarcastic about it. And then there's, you're too young, but there was a show back in the 80s called Moonlighting. It was Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis, right? And it was rapid fire dialogue, characters, one joke after another, kind of like Modern Family, where the jokes just kept coming, and they're talking over each other, and it's just hilarious because they're not listening to each other.
I will dispute that you can't do the dialogue and show the effect. It's just harder, and that is the thing, is that you have to learn both. Like some of the things that someone can see, you will have to have someone describe. I had a scene in The Shattering Peace where a character says, beer tastes like ass. I want to be clear, though, I have never actually eaten ass. And then the next thing that comes out of his mouth is, why did you just spit out your beer? And then the person responds to that. So you can do it, but you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very artful about doing that sort of thing. But I do think the rat-a-tat-tat, the back and forth, is a lot harder to do. And maybe you can talk a little bit about this, about when it's not just two people, but it's more. Because you were talking about having the multimodal conversation.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, it's, and I kind of can't help but write books about big gay friend groups where everyone is just going around making fun of each other the entire time. And I think the more people you add into a conversation in prose, you're exponentially making it harder for yourself. Absolutely. Yeah. So many dialogue tags, and I think so many readers like you can get away with just having dialogue, not much else going on for a while. But I think a lot of readers will zone out if there's nothing else happening. And so, I mean, like you were saying, John, I think the key is coming up with some kind of situation setting that connects to and enhances the humor. So like, I think about, like, in my book, I have a lot of scenes where everyone's bantering and they're also like trying to fix a leaky pipe, and it's hard for some reason, and it doesn't have to. I try not to overthink it, but like you have to think of something like that, something else going on. Exactly, stage direction. Yeah.
We're going to throw. Yep, we're going to throw the questions to the audience. Okay. So, who?
Wait. I have rules. Questions must be in the form of a question. Questions are one-part questions. Questions are as short as possible because there are a lot of you, and there are 5 of us up here, and we want to get to as many questions as possible. Go.
Okay. So, with all that said.
Great. So for Craig Alanson, Austin Meyer, big Expeditionary Force junkie. Thank you. Can't wait for book 14. Read them also for.
Question.
Gray. Oh my goodness.
I didn't.
Makes it.
I didn't. So I tried to I wrote 3 books that I actually finished. Tried for years to get an agent, an editor, a publisher, nothing. The books were too long, they were too different, blah, 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 blah. So my wife finally convinced me, self-publish them, sort of as because then you'll shut up about it, with no idea that I was going to sell any books. And it kind of took off. And I published January 11th, 2016. By April, we were talking about me quitting my job. I had a real job back then. But I kept getting all these spam emails. I mean, now I get these emails of, hey, author name, your book title was an amazing thrill ride. I can't believe main character's name did that. How could you leave us hanging? I can market your book for a fee, blah, 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 right? Okay. So I was getting all these emails of, wow, your book is would make an amazing audiobook. Give us $12,000 and we'll do it. So this one company up in Toronto, Podium, they contacted me and said, hey, revenue share, you pay nothing, and we're going to get R.C. Bray to do it. I'm like, R.C. Bray? The guy from The Martian, the best-selling audiobook of all time at that point? No way. You're not going to get him. And they signed him. And by the way, he's a super nice guy. And he's from my part of New England, so we have a lot of the same cultural references. Like when I talk about fluffernutters, he doesn't, or brown bread in a can, American chop suey, eating hot dogs and, beanie weenies on Saturday night. But yeah, so I didn't get R.C. Bray. Now, I did do something smart. When my contract was ready to expire, the publisher had signed R.C. Bray to an exclusive contract, except for the joint venture company we signed to do revenue share with him. Because they were going to say, you got to accept our terms or you can't get R.C. Bray. I said, well, accept. Yeah. Anyway, so then he did the Convergence series. And I asked him beforehand if he wanted to do a talking dog. And he's like, dude, I've always wanted a talking dog. And then he said, by the way, for the next book, if you want to do a talking cat, I have a great voice for it. So the next book has, it's like, he does like this Jimmy Durante cat. It's the grumpiest cat. Yeah. So no, I did not choose my audiobook narrators. Did you choose Will Wheaton?
So the story behind me and Will Wheaton is we met because we have a friend in common, my friend Michael Burns, and Mike, it was 2008, was out talking to Will about something, and Will's like, yeah, I've heard about this I've been reading this great new book. It's Old Man's War. It's amazing. It's by this guy named John Scalzi. Have you ever met him? And, I was like, and Mike was like, yes, I was in his wedding. And then Will and I met, and Will at the time was looking to get into audiobooks, and so he had asked me, can I borrow one of your short stories basically to do an audio audition? I was like, absolutely, go ahead and do that. And then a few months later, Audible bought a bunch of my backlists, and they're like, who would you like to have? And I was like, let's have Will Wheaton. And it wasn't just an act of pity, throwing him a bone, for money, but much like you and R.C. Bray, we grew up in the same area. We were around the same age. We have the same references, all of that sort of stuff. If you listen to him and me talk at the same time, you realize that we're basically, have the same rhythms and everything else like that, except, of course, he is so much better because he is an actual actor. But he is also an author, and that's really important because he understands the writing process and the rhythm and everything else like that. And the other thing is that, of course, anytime he needs to, ask me a question, he'll be like, dude, how do you pronounce this? And I'll be like, dude, you pronounce it like this, a dude. So it worked out very well. Should we go on to the next question?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you have this intention, right? I'm funny. I'm going to write a funny book. But then when you start adding in like capitalism or, corporate overlords or anything kind of heavy, other than throwing the whole book away, how do you yank the story back to being funny?
I mean, the thing is that I think that corporate overlords are kind of funny. That's the sort of hideous tragedy of it all.
That's what starter villain's all about.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, I think I already kind of said it, but I don't see it as a dichotomy at all. I think I think if you're really focused on your characters, I think they can be funny and also horrible things can happen to them, and both will enhance the other in the reader's eye because they are they feel connected to the character either because they're funny or because of what they're going through, or both. I don't think it's a dichotomy at all.
The other thing I would say is listen to your story. Sometimes the story doesn't want to be funny, and that's okay. You can start off writing one story and having it become another, and then you will find in your revisions or whatever it is that you do, second, third drafts, if that's what you do, that you can accommodate both, or that the story is going in a different direction. Tell the best story, and maybe the best story in this case isn't a funny one.
So you talked about out-of-control capitalism, corporations. That's the setting. It isn't the story. So how your characters react to that setting in the story, that's where the humor comes from. It is, oh, I am so done with this shit. You know, and it's some badass girl who's just not going to take it anymore. Yeah.
That is my setting. I've got the Universal Trade Zone running Earth, and I've got, this guy is working for the Pope of the New Catholic Church. So it's a lot of comedy is laughing so you don't cry. And part of the humor that I'm getting is this guy is in a situation where he's like, I don't think I'm supposed to be killing people if I'm a priest, but here it is. So
Feels wrong.
Think about Jack Vance. I was thinking about your thing about how about where is the story taking you. Jack Vance, who's written some of the funniest science fiction books in the Dying Earth series. I know it's not a funny title, but very, 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 very fun. But at the same time has written military science fiction, which in fact, oddly enough, I can't actually get into his military science fiction, which is oddly humorless. And it's really kind of interesting that this author has, Jack Vance was able to do both things. And I think it's because he did what you're talking about. He sort of followed, like, where does this story want to go? Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to see that.
Next question.
So the best thing about science fiction is that you get to build all these universes and everything. How much do you think the building the universe or building the situation adds to the humor or adds to the rhythm of the canter you get to have with your characters?
Well, I mean, totally. I mean, the world is absolutely going to inform how the characters behave. And also the texture, meaning like you can write a novel that has an almost cartoony texture. You can write one that has a texture that is extremely kind of cold and hard and dry and real in a different way. These textures, like, how cause and effect works for your characters. Is it more like the movie Brazil, where there's like the corporate comedy, that kind of thing, and everything is sort of absurd, or is it going to be more kind of pulled back and restrained? So you have all these tools beyond even just stuff about like the cars fly, that's about just the basic thing about how does cause and effect work in the world that you're creating, and you can actually therefore calibrate the humor based on that.
And also, I think if you're in touch with your characters, you don't always have to overthink it all the way into like this humor has to be extremely specific to this sci-fi other planet world I've created, because your characters, at least in the broadest sense, if they're robots or aliens or whatever, they're still people. And so like I mean, like a lot of the humor in my book comes from the fact that the characters spend most of it all trapped on a spaceship together, which is, I think, if not in the particulars, in the broadest sense, a situation that most of us can relate to. And there is
It's a road comedy.
exactly. And there's so much humor to be found in that in every sense. Yeah.
Everything that's been said before, and also, like I said, so much comes out of the consequences. I mean, science fiction, it's not about the flying car. It's about the traffic jam that happens because of the flying car, right? And how people deal with that. So a lot of the humor is going to come out of the consequences of the world that you build. So in which case, world building, which is not the panel that we're doing. That was the 1 o'clock panel, but nevertheless, world building will provide consequences, and from consequences can come humor and comedy.
Okay, so I do more world building in the action part of the book than in humor, but I occasionally do something like I introduce a new alien species that is obsessed with gambling. Their Gamblers Anonymous is they encourage you to gamble if you've lost that zeal. And it's just, what? And their street gangs have initial public offerings. I mean, it's so that was something where I planned it out, but usually it's just situational characters reacting to this absurd or oppressive situation they're in.
Yeah, I think you can find different ways when you're building the world. Like I have a cat-like race called the Dakur, and they find most humans smell really bad because they have very sensitive sense of smell. So there's a whole line of humor that comes out of that in different situations depending on how close a circumstance he's forced into other humans or into circumstances with humans with. So I think it depends on, what you're building into that world. You can build in things that then lead themselves to humor, lend themselves to the humor.
We've got time for one more.
Thank you. I guess a question for everyone, and it's about balancing humor and dramatic tension. So take Marvel movies, for example. They're very successful, used to be successful, I don't know, and very funny at times, especially when they're written by Joss Whedon. But then people also complain that the humor may happen in in the wrong moment and kind of breaks the tension. And then they're like, if the hero doesn't take villains seriously, why should the audience do that? You know what I mean? How do you balance that?
I mean, those people are no fun.
They watch the DC movies.
Right, and you should definitely swipe left on them. But the other thing is, and I think you were hinting at this quite a lot, if not explicitly stating it. One of the great things about providing humor is it allows you to have so much more dynamic range with the emotion of your characters. I recently did a book that was called When the Moon Hits Your Eye, right? The moon turns to cheese, right? It's obviously a farcical idea, and people were in there expecting comedy. But there were also chapters where I explicitly made people cry, or if I was successful, and I was. But that's the whole point, is that you've lifted them up, you've given them that much headroom, so that when you bring them back down again, the drop is like a roller coaster. So yes, absolutely having those, and then the question becomes, as you say, modulating them.
I think it's just having a handle on your tone as a writer, which is so important. And I'm a little bit more with you in the sense of I know what you're talking about, in the sense of like the way everyone jokes about the Marvel movies now. It's like supposed to be a tense, scary scene, and Robert Downey Jr. goes, "He's right behind me, isn't he?" I think you do, if you want your reader to take something seriously, you have to demonstrate that you as an author take it seriously, and so you have to, of course, you have to balance that with the humor. But again, I don't think it's a dichotomy at all, because just like in real life, we're all always breaking the tension for ourselves and for each other. So it's just about where you want your tone to live, for sure.
I have an eccentric answer to this about that does involve pooing, which is so in my book, Landscape with Invisible Hand, the main character has in fact a disease based on Crohn's disease, where he has a real problem with excretion, and the idea was that it fits into sort of like the sort of dystopian part of the world that was created. But at the same time, it was so interesting that I got a letter from a bunch of kids at a camp for Crohn's disease. It was not this was not an element of the book that I thought was going to get a lot of play. They wrote to me and they were like, "Thank you for actually taking seriously the fact that we have this thing that seems to everyone like comedy." That is to say, like, poo problems seem like comedy, not if you actually have this disease. And so there's a camp for kids with Crohn's, and they all read this book and wrote to me, and then they told me that their camp motto is "shit happens." Anyway, but all I'm saying is that I feel like, there's such a range in story after story, a range of what will actually work. Yeah. There's no single answer to it.
So you talked about Iron Man saying he's right behind me. That's okay, because they've already established that's how Iron Man would act. He reacts funny like that. Not all the Hawkeye doesn't do anything funny in the movies, because that's not his character. So your answer, the question about how do you put humor into an action scene without breaking the tension? It's situational. It is, okay, here's the plan. You're going to go outside the spaceship and you're going to fix this antenna. Great. Where's the spacesuit? Well, shit. It doesn't break the tension at all. It just adds humor to the scene.
Yeah. All right, you gotta close it all up for us.
Yes. Yes. Leave it with a tear in the eye. Wrap it up.
it has to serve the story. Period. I mean, you got to earn it and you got to make it pay off. That's all.
All right.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out.